Debt is one of the most commonly avoided conversations in any household.
Credit card debt, credit card debt.
Now, while Peter Griffin and Glenn Quagmire enjoy singing a song about it, we as Canadians hate talking about it. It's almost like we just know it's so bad, so we just avoid it altogether.
Why confront something when you can avoid it, right?
Why confront something when you can just avoid it? Just like us, governments all over the world have been tackling the issue of debt. Now, in our conversation today, we're discussing Canada's debt. Is it a crisis? We'll be covering terminology like debt to GDP and personal debt. So firstly, I'd like to turn to Vince to give us an explanation very simply.
Okay.
When we're using the term debt to GDP or debt to income, what does that mean?
Well, debt to GDP is essentially when you look at a country's gross domestic product, how much or what percentage of that gross domestic product would it take to pay off a country's national debt?
Okay, so gross domestic product being what the country creates, like how much it produces in value?
In goods and services.
Got you. Okay, now debt to income, how would you explain that?
Well, how much debt encompasses one's income, basically. So what percentage of one's income is attributed to debt?
Got you. And that is a individual Canadian on an individual level.
Yeah.
Okay, good. We'll turn it back. So to put it in perspective, I thought these stats were really interesting. The United States is $36 trillion in debt. Japan's around $10 trillion in debt. Canada is around 1.3 trillion in debt. Well, when you add up the debt to GDP of all the provinces in Canada, you get 108%. The US is actually in some way close by at 118%, so only 10% more. That's concerning as a Canadian. And just to have some more fun, the total global debt to GDP, the amount of valued product the world creates versus its total debt, 333%. So this isn't just a Canadian issue. The total amount of debt in the world, governments, businesses, and individuals is more than 3 times the value of all the goods and services produced globally in a year. Keep in mind, 60 to 80% debt to GDP ratio is considered sustainable. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. I'm sorry to I just threw a hammer on that whole conversation, but Vince, Jay, Anthony, thank you for joining me.
Our pleasure.
Great to be here.
Okay, so I wanted to start, who's to blame for this debt?
Oh, boy.
Because you see, I just got to clear the air here because you see it on social media, somebody's to blame. Who's to blame? Who's to blame, guys? Come on. Jay, who's to blame?
Look, I mean, ultimately, it's our politicians that borrow the money. That's the bottom line. Of course, we vote for those politicians. So in a sense, voters also have to take accountability, but it's the politicians that ultimately deliver deficit budgets and
would you say it's just the way that the system's done? Take on debt, use that to say you're growing the economy?
No.
It's an excuse. Yeah.
I think it's an excuse. Here's the thing. At the end of the day, we need to learn to say no. And we're to blame as voters. We're voting in the politicians. They're spending the money. We don't want them to say no, but they should say no. And so what happens is it's like everything is free. Everyone thinks in Canada everything is free. Well, at the end of the day, it's not free. We're paying for it, and we're paying for it through debt.
Well, this is the thing. The question is, do you want higher taxes? Do you want lower spending? Some people will just say, well, we don't want higher taxes. We still want the higher spending. Borrow the money. We'll worry about it later. But we can't do that as households because eventually it comes home to roost. And it will come home to roost for us, with governments as well.
I laugh because, you're not wrong. I think we as just individuals I think there's an expectation misalignment a little bit. Anthony, I want to let you jump in on this. What do you think?
I think people will see my facial expression when you're talking about the debt of the entire planet. Now I know why everybody wants to go to Mars. Not a bad idea. No, you know what? I have a different opinion on debt and a different view on debt. My whole thing is, what's it doing? What is it encompassing? So are we taking on a couple billions of dollars in debt because we want to build a bridge that crosses a roadway, create more trade, decrease trade barriers, improve industry confidence? Are we taking on debt because Canadians need healthcare, because we have to provide more services for people? I'm not against taking on debt, but I do think it should be the government's responsibility to have a payment plan back and to do it in a fiscally responsible way. We've done it before. We can do it again. Yeah. And I think the financial calamity that's happened because of COVID is another lesson learned. And there's a blueprint of what to do and what not to do in the future.
But before COVID, we also had massive amounts of debt. And so I think what you're talking about is ROI. What is the ROI if we're going to build the road?
Okay, I want to leave it there because part of our conversation is on good debt versus bad debt, and what is that? And I mean, it's really subjective, but we'll be right back to continue the conversation.